Hello and welcome to Football and Grits. A special welcome to the Tennessee fans who are just waking up from their 48-hour bender, I'm sure.
If they're
Joining the
not
show.
incredibly hungover, missed opportunity. Yeah.
A heck of a weekend, and that's the appropriate place to start, Brody, with the Vols.
The Hendon Hooker
Uh,
show.
yeah, 461 yards of total offense, I believe. He'd only topped 112 yards rushing one time ever. I watched this game actually, the Virginia Tech Liberty game against Hugh Freeze and Malik Willis back
Ooh,
in 2019, I
I
believe.
remember that one.
Great game that I don't remember who won that game, but it was decided on a last second field goal. But it was tremendously entertaining because I remember thinking Hooker and Willis was a heck of a showdown. Anyway,
Yeah.
a spectacular performance. I think we've seen Hendon Hooker really mature as a passer. I think he has a great grasp of this offense, but he also has a great feel of the game itself. And I think too, he in general values the football and he makes such wise decisions. And I asked him last week, actually, a pretty simple question: Why do you never throw interceptions, Hendon? And he was talking about when he was in high school. They played in a pretty run-heavy offense. He's like, I'd go 8 for 9 for 218 and a couple touchdowns. And he's like, you knew when you were throwing the ball, you didn't have that many opportunities, and he always valued the ball. He says, and that's taken over. He does get to throw the ball a few more times than 9 times a game in this offense, but you still see that. And I think when you look back at his time at Tennessee, he's accounted for 42 touchdowns. Or I believe 47 total touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And when you talk about that kind of efficiency and that kind of control, you can get results like this because if you make a big mistake, I don't know how that game goes for you. And Tennessee, that game was kind of teetering on Tennessee being able to break it open versus Florida kind of inching closer. And obviously you had some nervous moments late. But I don't think you can come away from that game thinking anything other than Hendon Hooker won that game for Tennessee and did it without Cedric Tillman, who had 19 targets when Tennessee played Pitt.
Yep.
He's a bit of a safety blanket for him and a large safety blanket. He's like one of those oversized, like, the giant shack bed from MTV Cribs back in the day. He's like
Can't
a
say
safety
I remember
blanket.
that
Like, I think I'm dating myself, but I know.
I mean, I watched
watching
MTV
it.
Cribs. I don't remember that one.
Well, there was a Shaq one, and he has a gigantic bed that makes Shaq look tiny. That's the size of the security blanket that Cedric Tillman is, who was walking around in a boot Saturday night.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Brody, and also the thoughts of our listeners. We have our comments. We're keeping an eye on it. So if you guys want to participate in the show, we can drop you in here, interact with us. But Brody, I think the question for Tennessee right now is, what do you make of this team and how high can they go? Because you beat Florida, you beat Pitt. Those are 2 wins that make you feel like you cleared some hurdles to a really big time season. But it's also still, you're not beating, playoff caliber teams. You're beating good teams. But you're still sitting there 4-0. You literally can't be any better. What do you make of the Vols and where they're headed right now?
Yeah, I am now officially buying just because I was absolutely blown away by Hendon Hooker. Like, I mean, I've always been a Hendon Hooker fan, like anyone, but there was always some element. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this without being insulting, but like, some in the back of my mind, I had this like empty calorie, like that UCF offense, kind of like, how good is he as like a real quarterback, or is it just like a good scheme, a good passer who can hit his open guys? And I know he's good, but he blew me away Saturday. Just like you said, even to your point, without Tillman, without that security blanket, he was still making these confident, tough one-on-one throws into tight windows, but still responsible. That stat 47-2 ratio. That's some Chip Kelly, Nick Foles, that one season stuff right there. But like, I mean, and I felt really dumb. I'm glad you pointed out that he normally doesn't run like that, because I'm like, am I an idiot? Like, has he been this great runner all the time? Because I know his stats
he can, but I think that's, to me, so to your point about the offense, this is a very quarterback-friendly offense. There's a lot of quarterbacks who can do very well in this offense, but Hendon Hooker and his ability takes it to the next level for 2 reasons. I think one, obviously the accuracy. He doesn't miss a ton of throws. He's been a little shaky this season, which I
on
thought
the run,
was,
he was hitting tight windows in the red zone. I'm like, what is going on in here? Yeah.
But I think the thing that Josh Heupel pointed out post game that I really felt like in the moment was true is he was making really, really good decisions constantly. He can run. It's not to the point where Bryce Young like doesn't want to run, where he only extends plays. And Bryce Young, I think he would be well served to run more. But every time he got in open space, he's keeping his eyes downfield. But there was never a time where it's like, oh, I'm going to make a really difficult throw instead of taking my 8 yards and moving the chains. Or there was never a time where he's forcing it into 3 guys and to try and run, where he have to lower his shoulder and missing a guy, wide open that's sitting there. I think he had 6 incompletions on the night. A couple of those were drops, and I think ultimately he's a guy that's is just feeling himself right now. I think the pocket presence.
That's a great point,
and he's giving Tennessee what they need. And if Tennessee is going to do special things this year, which we'll get into here in a bit, I think, certainly he's the guy that's going to do that. They need to get Tillman healthy, but that's huge for them.
I mean, it's a great point, though, because it wasn't just like they made great plays. Like maybe he's what we thought Anthony Richardson was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, but like I don't want to get too out of it. But because it's like, it's not just that he makes these great throws or these great plays. Like I'm glad you pointed that out. It looked like an offense in firm command. Like, and we talk so much about all these great quarterbacks, and I'm the huge Bryce Young fan, but like he doesn't always look like he's in command. That offense has flaws. It's kind of making plays. It's rare to see a quarterback that both is like just absolutely dialed in an offense, has control of it, and then can just dictate defense however he wants. Mac Jones did it, Burrow did it, but like it's not that common as much as like it's an offensive friendly world to look like that, always making the right call. I was all in, and just I know it's time to talk about what we think Tennessee can be. Like I've been kind of poo-pooing them a little bit, right? Like, oh, they're good, but like, how tough are they? Man, I'm not saying I think they make the playoff or anything like that, but yeah, man, I think they're probably better than Kentucky now. I'm ready to say that, and I think they are a top 10 team. They are that good.
I think that I've felt that way from the start of the season. I think Kentucky's really good. Mm-hmm. I just think Tennessee's a little better. I've thought from the start of the season, Tennessee is one of the 15 best teams in the country. Just a matter of time until you kind of prove it. I was surprised they didn't start the season ranked with as good as they played last year, especially when you had Hooker rolling and with all the stuff they brought back this year. I think they had 17 starters back. I think they had something like 80% of their defensive production back, and then of course you have Hooker, you have Tillman, you bring back your receivers. They lost Javonte Payton and Velus Jones, but Jabari Smalley got a pretty deep stable of backs and 4 offensive linemen back. I was surprised that more people were not on Tennessee to start this season. Maybe it's the Tennessee of it. I think people are used to seeing them. I wonder how much of that affected them. But
what it was for me?
To me, it's weird.
It was like I knew everything advanced analytic, like returning production, like you said, everything about it. Loved him. That's the stuff I'm normally in on. But there was this part of me that just felt like it was like putting up really efficient stuff in the right moments, or like, so I thought maybe it was like a number skewer, but like when they played great teams, they weren't going to be that good. And I'm just wrong. And you're right. Maybe a little bit of that just is the Tennessee of it, the Butch Jones era of it, right? Of just like the talent, but like, and their production's good, but are they a football team? And I think that really is it. Like, are they just empty calories? I keep repeating that, but I think that's what it felt like. And they are not. And by the way, also baked in is I was not high on Josh Heupel. And I know we were going to want to ask you a bunch of questions about this, but like, I just thought of him as the guy who took over a sports car at UCF and still won, but every production thing, like every analytic went down a good bit, right? Like
that's won. True. That happened.
Like they went from an elite team to an above average team. I think that's fair to say. And I'm just like, I don't see it, and I'm wrong. And I want to ask you, like, obviously a lot of it is, when you look at what he's done here, is he just a scheme guy that's a good scheme guy and and got the most out of more talent, or are there things that we're missing that he's good at, if that makes sense?
So I think 2 things. One, schematically, him and Alex Golesh, I mean, this is the Baylor system that they're running.
Yeah.
It is a run-first system that obviously spreads you out. wants to stretch the field, wants to be very aggressive. And I think they have that mindset of, hey, we're going to attack. I think that guys really like playing in that. But schematically, this is the Baylor system. There's not a ton of difference in what they are doing right now. There's some tweaks. There's not a ton of difference in what they're doing right now and what Art Briles did to win the Big 12 twice, I believe, back in the day. So they're running that. But I think culturally, coming away from the Jeremy Pruitt era, which was very much, they talking to recruits, and obviously I covered the entirety almost of the Jeremy Pruitt era at Tennessee. Some guys really liked that it was almost a transactional approach, that he was very honest with people, that said, hey, I need you to win games. I'm going to use you to win games and keep my job here. Use me to get to the NFL because I have all this track record of, Jalen Ramsey and all these big time guys that I've coached at Alabama and Florida State and Georgia. I've got that track record. Come here and do that. Then, of course, you have the element of not treating people great. I think obviously during the Jeremy Pruitt era, that was kind of a hallmark and something I don't know that he would even necessarily shy away from. He would call it demanding a lot. Some people would call it just being a jerk. And I think when you're at Alabama dealing with that and you are sitting there, playing that game, you have to do that and have production when all your assistants are getting head coaching jobs and all you're making.
And that probably works
4 or 5 guys four or five first round picks.
And that probably works when you have like 10 to 15 years of being like, this is how we do things that we've proven it. You can't go in year 1 and 2 doing that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But continue.
Yeah. And so, that's I think coming away from that, Heupel couldn't be more opposite.
Yeah.
In that he is a very normal person. I always say, that's college coaches, particularly head coaches, have some level of like psychopath in them. Either they're geniuses or just insane workaholics or some mixture of both, or there's always some they're very rarely normal people.
Yeah.
And Josh Heupel, who I've covered going back a decade plus to his days at Oklahoma when he was sort of the unofficial, seemingly heir apparent to Bob Stoops until that kind of went sideways and he's kind of rebooted his career. I think ultimately that situation, he's just different. I think, and I wrote a story when he came in there about how he was operating at UCF, and it's a matter of I think sometimes you hear the stories of oh, he says hey to everybody in the hallway and treats people like normal people. But I think that really does have an impact. And I also think there's a level of humility there where when you go through what he went through at Oklahoma and have to reboot your career and have this second act that, let me tell you, a lot of people did not think he was going to have. Nope. I think there's a level of appreciating it, which I think you saw on Saturday. And I think you see that he doesn't believe necessarily that nobody can tell him anything, which you see a lot of coaches who've never dealt with failure before, not believe, everything I've always done is won. Yep. So whatever I believe is definitely going to work because I've never been wrong or failed anywhere. And I think when you have the failure that he has, I think that humility allows you to bring in other people's ideas. And I think that was a huge problem during the Jeremy Pruitt era, where when something went wrong, he wanted to fix everything and got himself spread way too thin. Yep. And so I think it's all of those things. Schematically, like I said, I don't know, how much is Josh Heupel ingenuity, but culturally, that's all him. And I think Tennessee, this feels like a program that is having a lot more fun and guys enjoy being in the facility. And part of it was the pandemic late in the Pruitt era, but it was a grind for guys. And they especially year one, adjusting icy and just you're grinding guys down. By the end of the season, if it's November and guys are like, man, how long is this till the season's over? That's not great. And I think you saw a lot of that. And so I think culturally, Josh Heupel came at the right time. And then schematically, they have a system that allows some of these talents to flourish. I mean, Cedric Tillman, I think he had 12 something career receptions before last season. And now he's sitting there on the short list for the Blitnikoff. So, having a competent offensive scheme, which Tennessee, I can tell you, did not have at any point in the Pruitt era, is a major thing. And here we are sitting here, and Tennessee is, doing things doing better things sooner than I think anybody could have predicted. If you had said in 5 years is Tennessee going to be in the top 10 under Josh Heupel, I don't know that a lot of people would have said yes. And also, what are they going to look like in year 2? I can tell you, not a lot of people thought College Game Day was going to be there and they'd have, this juice behind the program, but they do. And like I said, I think you combine all of those things. He was kind of the right guy at the right time for them, and he, the sort of TikTok, pendulum swing of, well, we don't like this, so we're going to get the opposite. I think it's kind of silly, but in a lot of ways, I think that swing back for Tennessee in terms of the personality of the coach and the style of the program has worked, and I think the proof's in the pudding.
Well, then that leads to the thing I'm really fascinated by, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, so I don't expect you to know the answer. But
I thrive on the spot, Brody.
Do you? But I mean, okay, so there is an element though to your point of it was the perfect zig to the zag. He's the right guy to get so much out of what they had, to get more out of it, all that for so many reasons. And by the way, I don't want to poo-poo it, credit to him. But where are you at with what he can do, year 4 and 5? Because sometimes there's a lot of times, there's a reason a lot of interim coaches thrive in the NFL and college, because they are the right fit for that moment, but they're not the guy you want building the program. Where do you do you think Heupel can actually get this thing a lot, or is he a bit more of a guy who can just make them better quickly?
Well, I think that's a question for our good friend Ari Wasserman in the recruiting realm.
True.
And I think ultimately you have to win those battles, and that's what depends. And I think when people were looking at the skepticism surrounding Josh Heupel when he got here, a lot of it was about the recruiting, because the recruiting at UCF was not great. But it's been pretty good at Tennessee.
It's decent.
It's been solid. They need to be better if you want to be, we say playoff, but we'll talk about it in terms of the 4-team playoff. If you want to be that team that Tennessee wants to be, I don't know that they're ever going to get there, but the fans want to be competing for national titles. That's the stated goal. For people around this program, you have to recruit well. Now, if you can recruit at a top 10 level consistently,
which they're number 9 right now.
Yeah, and you have a game changer at quarterback, which they obviously have right now in Hendon Hooker. Can Joe Milton be that guy next year? And then, of course, Nico Iamaleava in the future. Can he
honestly,
be that guy?
When I asked that question, I almost forgot. Man, they do have him. That's a very
they have Nico.
Sign.
Now, the flip of the Nico piece of this is I think a lot of people thought, well, when they get Nico, it's going to be an avalanche of talent. And they've gotten some guys, but it has not been the same effect as when Arch committed to Texas. And then all of a sudden, all these guys are jumping in Texas' boat. That's not something that's really happened at Tennessee. But like I said, if you have consistent top 10 classes and you have a game changer at quarterback, which, Clemson learned last year, if you miss on a guy or a guy has a bad year, it can get humbling in a hurry. But if you have that play at quarterback, and I think in a quarterback-friendly system like what Tennessee is running, you have a better chance of having that from year to year, then you can really do some things. So I think that's where I really feel like Tennessee is well placed. And it's worth noting, Brody.
Yeah.
Tennessee off this week, goes to LSU. I don't think LSU can score with them.
Probably not.
But who I also think might struggle to score with them? The Alabama Crimson Tide.
I forgot to tell you this.
coming to Neyland Stadium. But
I can't believe I forgot to tell you this. I was at a New Orleans sports bar Thursday night, just watching Thursday Night Football, and I guess a guy is a fan of the show. Hope you're listening. And he was like, "Hey, Brody Miller, blah blah blah," and he's like, "Your buddy, he's wrong about Alabama," and he thought you were overreacting to one iffy game. So
iffy game. Did he miss the whole 2021 season? There were 6 iffy games.
I do kind of think I slightly disagree with you. I still think Bama was probably the second best team, but we don't have to go down that path again. But I just want to say there are people out there who are already getting you're ruffling feathers here on Football and Grits.
Well, that's good. I always like to ruffle some feathers. But
you can be our Ari.
Yeah, ultimately, we're going to see. Alabama goes to Arkansas this weekend. I think Arkansas, that toughness on the lines and having an experienced quarterback in KJ Jefferson, I think they'll have a shot. But for me, the corners that Arkansas has, I covered Arkansas's game against Cincinnati. Cincinnati had receivers running free all day. And I know we've kind of slow played Auburn or Alabama's talent at receiver, and I still believe that. But I think Arkansas's corners really are struggling. We saw that last week, and Arkansas. I'm not sure they match up great with Alabama, but if Alabama comes out and doesn't play well, and Arkansas can control possession, which they may be able to do, we'll see.
If they can,
it could be dangerous. But this is, again, Alabama going on the road. We saw this last year. It's hard to win on the road in the SEC, and I don't know that this is your older brother's Alabama team that's going to just sort of blow teams out of the water. That's not really – we don't see that a ton. So we'll see. And if they do, hats off. We'll be back here Monday, and I'll be saying, hey, maybe I was wrong about Alabama. If they can just roll over Arkansas, I'll be impressed. But we'll see. That's to go, from Tennessee's side of things before we move on, though. I'm telling you, that Neyland matchup is going to be really tough for Alabama because I don't care who you are. Like, Tennessee's going to score 30 on you, more than likely. And if you're not very good or you don't understand how to slow down that system, they can score 60 on you. But Alabama, Alabama's going to have to score to beat Tennessee. And Tennessee, sure, they're willing to let you score some points on them. But that Alabama-Tennessee game, I will be there. That is going to be a really dangerous game for Alabama because this Alabama team doesn't score at will. And I think Tennessee can scheme up and slow down those receivers. And they're going to hit some plays. And Tennessee was knocking on the door against Alabama a year ago with that team in Tuscaloosa. So we'll see.
Yeah, it feels like, and this is where I will agree with you. It feels like I think Alabama bounces back really hard this week. Like they have their all right, chill guys, win by 24 game or whatever against Arkansas, and everyone's like, all right, they're good, they're back. Everyone's gonna be on Bama. Everyone's gonna be talking about them again because they somehow forgot about Tennessee during the bye, and that's where I'll be with you. I think Tennessee will probably be the play that week, just because. You're right. I think they do match up well. And it's like, I don't have numbers in front of me and you can tell me I'm flat out wrong about this. But I know the defense is flawed, but I feel like they have bodies in the pass rush and they can create some havoc even though they're making mistakes and whatnot on the back end. So they can take advantage of that O-line.
I like Tennessee's front seven. I think they were really underrated coming into the year.
Dumb.
Amari Thomas, Byron Young, Tyler Barron, they're thin. They don't have a lot of guys. They got to stay healthy. But they got some guys who can make some plays. Byron Young, first-team All-SEC guy coming into the season. Tyler Barron was a super recruit from here in town. So, I've been on this Tennessee team this year just because of how much they brought back and you have a game-changer quarterback, and you kind of saw that on display. They didn't play a perfect game. We haven't seen Tennessee really play great this season. They played badly against Pitt and still beat a top 20 team on the road. They played, that was a B- probably from Tennessee. Defensively, they struggled. Offensively, they could have been a little bit more proficient in the running game against Florida, but still a strong game. On the other side of that, Brody.
Our weekly discussion point.
Anthony Richardson, okay?
Should we just make him our third host? It might be better. Yeah.
Listen, 453 yards. That is the most of any Power 5 quarterback all season.
True.
At any point, yes. I looked this up yesterday. It's in my column this morning.
I didn't.
And only two guys in all of FBS have thrown for more yards in a game this season so far. Listen, I get all of the sort of Anthony Richardson skeptic. He was not good the last couple weeks, but you saw again some of the skill and some of the talent and why he has gotten the hype that he's gotten, because we saw more of him extending plays, making plays on the run, still being elusive, where Tennessee had him a couple times and he still gets out and it extends the play, makes the run. And then of course there's the element, the cam element of his game where, Florida's running that student body right play, that just QB power off the edge where they get those guards out there. And that is really tough to stop on, 3rd and 2, where they just say, hey, we're going to throw bodies at you. And then if you can get through those bodies, there's a 250-pound, 260-pound quarterback lowering his shoulder right behind him. So good luck. Tennessee struggled to stop it. And I also said this during the game, Brody, because I was wondering if it was coming against Tennessee. But I'm telling you right now, it's coming against Georgia.
Yeah.
They run that student body right play. They put that on film. They probably ran that 6-7 times against Utah. They probably ran it 5 more times against
big
Tennessee.
Billy Napier thing, yeah.
They're going to run that, and they're going to step back, and they're going to leak out the tight end on the opening drive the first time they have a third and short against Georgia, and they're going to go up 7-0 against Georgia.
How obnoxious are you going to be on Twitter when that happens, though?
Oh, buddy.
Are we talking all caps?
I'm going to cut this clip. I'm going to put the date on it.
John, get to
That's 100% going to happen because you could see at the end of the game.
Yeah, that's a great call.
We saw it against Utah. We saw it against Tennessee. They are selling out hard. Yep. And that's going to be on film so many times. And Georgia, they're hungry. They're going to pursue. And so maybe it's not the first drive, but probably the first drive because you've had it on film so many times and it's so predictable and you could kind of see it coming. They'd load up that side and here they go. But ultimately, Brody, I think my question with Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, in your mind, like you talk about those two guys, you get so many eye rolls from people like, oh, we gotta talk about Will Levis again. We got to talk about these guys who are. Why do you think there is so much? I don't even know if you call it skepticism. I'd call it almost more annoyance that people have to recognize that like these guys are really talented NFL prospects. On the one hand, I think some of it centers around production. Yeah, you look at Will Levis. You look at Will Levis's numbers from last year. They don't knock your socks off. And then, of course, Anthony Richardson, after the Utah game, the couple games he had after that certainly were not good. But you can't deny the tools. I think I don't understand why fans are so annoyed with Will Levis and Anthony Richardson outside of Kentucky and Florida.
I think it has a lot to do with, first off, production. Yeah. I think there's something that exists, and this might be like too, Brody, you think too much, but like the projection versus reality thing that exists that like we live in a sports discussion culture. I think you and I are a big part of it of like, we fall in love with projections so much, and so much is about the draft and traits and like what this team can be. Even the way we discuss like NBA teams is about like your core for the future and your draft picks. And it's like, I think there is another subsection of people, and a decently sizable one, that are just kind of like, all right, we fall in love too much with projection. Who are you now? Like what, like there's too much of, this guy does this, and it's like, yeah, but he also cost you this. And I think there's a lot of people that just get really, really frustrated with that kind of discussion that people like us have. And sure, you and I are getting some nuance too and talk about the bad, but I think that's where a lot of it comes from. Is like, why are you telling me how good this guy is when I saw him lose this game? And I get that because that is probably a slight flaw in how we talk about things. But I think there's something to that because it's like, yeah, Richardson, even though I think, I mean, this is probably where you want him to live, right? Like he's not going to be Utah Richardson all the time. Like that's not fair. And you definitely don't want him to be South Carolina, or not South Carolina. Sorry. You don't want to be the last two, South Florida and like the last two games, Richardson. But this is probably where you want him to live, where like he wasn't perfect. Like realistically, he was 24-44. Like he had flaws, had a fumble and a pick, and like, you know, but he made plays. He was productive. He kept you in the game. You and I both kind of were worried that like he was going to, an up-tempo, more possession game would be more chance for him to screw it up. And if anything, I think that free-flowing game made him more comfortable, it seemed like. So it's like...
He was in a rhythm early. Some of the throws he made in that game where he's extending the play, keeping his eyes downfield. I think, you know, there's two sort of, you know, styles of quarterback or two sort of, reading the field if you're a quarterback. Yeah. We saw it against Kentucky and against South Florida. He was struggling to read the field. He'd have guys running wide open and just not see them at all. I didn't see a lot of that, especially I didn't cover Kentucky or USF's games against Florida, so I didn't see him in person. But when you're sitting in the press box, you have the all 22. You can tell which quarterbacks are doing what, and you can see, oh, he's missing guys constantly because you can see all the route combinations. It's a great way to watch a football game.
But do we think there was not much against Tennessee? Do you think there were more clearly open guys against Tennessee though than against, say, Kentucky?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And I think no. And I think, but the flip side of that is, while he does struggle to read the field from time to time, ultimately, when he is extending the play, for as much of a time as he has running, he just does a great job of keeping his eyes downfield and not just looking at the guys coming at him and saying, well, how am I going to beat that guy? He's looking to make a play down the field. And you saw that over and over against Tennessee, and that's a big reason why they were able to come back and threaten Tennessee late the way they were, because he was making plays in that way. So, listen, I get the annoyance with Anthony Richardson. It is what it is, but he's still a good player, guys. 453 yards. There's a reason why no one in the Power 5 has thrown for more yards than that, and he does it in his fourth or fifth career start on the road in a crazy atmosphere against a top 10 team. Listen, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
It was a very impressive point. If
453 yards is a lot
this
of
is
games.
his median, then you're in great shape. Yeah, you just
Yeah.
want to see consistency, and I think it's just as simple as that.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. Again, subscribe to the show. Leave a comment if you have some things to say. Of course, listen to the Andy Staples Show on our feed. A lot of shows. We have Power Hour on Tuesdays. Max Olson, Sam Kahn, of course. But looking forward, another debacle on Saturday, Brody. I'm watching Auburn Mizzou on the TVs above me, and I see Auburn come up short on a third down, about 46 yards out. I'm like, okay, well, they'll have a kick with 90 seconds to go or whatever it is. And then I kind of was looking down doing some stuff. I look up, and Missouri's defense is celebrating, and there's no kicker to be found anywhere on the field. And I'm like, wait, what just happened? I think I missed this. And from that moment on, I was like, if Missouri goes down and wins this game, I was like, Harsin is going to be gone by midnight. This is not even gonna, like that coaching debacle. It's just such a baffling decision. And I know Anders Carlson had a rough game, and I guess he missed a kick also that didn't count in that game because of an offsides. I know he'd had some rough go, but he's still a fifth-year senior. I think I looked it up. I think he's 11 of 16 in the last year or two from 40 yards and from 49 yards. The idea that you would, especially the way that they run the ball, decide to just run it, right up the gut, even if you give it to Tank Bigsby, I just that is not something that you want to do. And I think last week I wrote about Auburn's offensive line struggles. In that game against Penn State, they averaged 0.33 yards before contact. Yeah. And on Saturday, Tank Bigsby, 62 yards after contact.
Ooh.
44 yards rushing.
Yeah.
In short, that means your offensive line is not getting it done. But regardless of the baffling coaching decision, Auburn survives Missouri with that late fumble when they were an inch away from the end zone. Kids, unless it's fourth down, stop reaching for the end zone.
Yeah.
It does you no good. That only bad things can happen. Don't do it. But, all this conversation, all of this sort of waiting game for, the next time Auburn loses, Harsin's gone. He's sitting there. He has a room full of boosters that quite obviously this offseason were attempting to get him out of there. And then his AD, Alan Green, is gone, currently still looking for his replacement. This whole thing just feels like I don't know how you operate a program like this. I rarely have pity on college football coaches because they're making well into the seven figures to coach football. He'll be fine, but I don't like. I kind of don't really understand the point of this because it feels like they're just waiting for the next time they're going to lose a game. If he had beaten Penn State, convincingly, whatever that would have helped him. But I still think at the end of the day they'd be waiting for one bad loss to get rid of him. They don't want him there. What are we doing here, Brody? What are we doing?
In what world is Missouri the decider? If the decision, whether you beat Missouri or not, with so many SEC games to go, is the decider of whether or not Brian Harsin keeps his job, then you need to fire him. I know there's money and all that. That's a whole more complicated thing. I know the timing matters, but the ticker here on the bottom is, did Auburn's miracle win versus Missouri save his job? Of course not. He's getting fired. And shoot, a lot of people would argue the way they won that game almost reassures he's going to be fired soon. And it's like you look at his tenure, and so often it's like, it's a mess. He's getting screwed. But if I asked you, what does Brian Harsin do well so far? I don't know what it is. I don't know what their identity is. I don't know. I mean, they're not very good at the line of scrimmage. He's supposed to be a quarterback developer, and to be fair, he has not had good quarterbacks. So is what it is. But the quarterback play's been a mess. I don't know what they do well. And so much of that game that you're criticizing, right, is it all felt so reactionary. It was like the way they ran the ball with Bigsby, to your point, on a 4th and 1 and just pound the ball to him, it felt reactionary to everybody against the Penn State game being like, why didn't Tank Bigsby get the ball more? It's like, okay, I'm going to give him the ball more. And it's reactive and not proactive. And even this is me speculating out of my ass, but like even the fourth down, like you mentioned, it's like so much of it felt like I'm on the hot seat. We should be winning this game more than it is. It's like it became thinking of like we have to find a way to convincingly win this instead of just find a way to win a football game. Like it felt like I got to do something. I don't know. It was all such a mess. We all know he's on his way out. I can't get over the idea that this would change his fate. That is nonsense. I just can't get my head around that.
Well, it's like, okay, so Mizzou with Harrison Mevis misses a 28-yard kick. He had never missed a kick shorter than 30 yards or shorter than, in his career. He was, I believe it was 41 of 41 on extra points and I believe 11 of 11 on kicks shorter than 30 yards or whatever in his entire career. So you get this weird missed kick that doesn't happen, although he's had a kind of a rough year. And then, of course, the fumble at the end when Nathaniel Pete is cruising into the end zone to score.
It's so poetic, by the way. It is so poetic that they won without touching him. Like they won the game without even forcing the fumble. That is the most poetic explanation of that game.
Missouri of flea kicker and fifth down fame. I don't know that this Auburn game will go in the annals of Mizzou history of bad losses because I don't know that there's a lot of emotional investment in this team. But a pretty crazy loss to find a way to lose that. But ultimately, to your point, right now Auburn with Derek Hall and Iko Leota, rushing the passer is like the only thing they do reasonably well, and everything else is just very average. And that's not going to get it done in the SEC. So,
and I mean.
The whole thing is just uncomfortable. It's like, the whole thing of waiting and like, well, the next time Auburn loses a game they're not supposed to lose, well, that'll be the time. And I think in general, I'm just anti like waiting for the loss to drop the hammer. Again, I am a big believer in what needs to be done eventually should just be done immediately. Yes. And that feels like that's where Auburn is right now. And I think too,
look at what LSU did when they beat Florida. Then Ed Orgeron's announcement was the next day.
And the recruiting aspect of it is kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of 6-1, half dozen the other, because if you fire him, like as hard as it is to recruit now, it's not like if you fire him, it gets easier to recruit him because you're still, in theory, selling a future with unmotivated assistants and a future that you don't know what you're even selling. So what are you even doing? And there have been more than a few instances when you have a lame duck staff for a long period of time where recruiting just goes out the window. I can think of one very particular instance. Well, two that I know of for sure, that after the staff was fired, they just literally stopped recruiting entirely. They weren't making calls. They weren't making visits. I'm not saying that's going to happen at Auburn, but like ultimately
there's no right move.
There's no, And so, this limbo that they're in, it's uncomfortable for everybody. And I imagine it's really hard on the players as well. And maybe they can rally. Maybe Auburn comes out here and saves their season, and they're still sitting here at 3-1. They have LSU this weekend. Maybe they go into Georgia, into Ole Miss, and win those games. Probably not.
Wouldn't put money on it.
But but if they do, maybe that's what you're sitting there for. But then again, if you have a booster group that doesn't want you there, they're just waiting. Even if you beat Georgia. I still don't even think that saves your job, Brody, because they're just going to wait until you lose another game. And they say, well, Georgia was a flash in the pan. They just didn't get it done ultimately. The Penn State game, if there was any doubt, that ended it. So,
unless he wins, I just don't see any world. Like, I don't see any world where it's not already decided. I think it's literally just timing. Mm-hmm. So, and I want to move on. And also, I know we're going to save this topic for like when it all happens. So I don't want to go in depth, but speed round. Like, who would be your Auburn go-to guy right now if you're hiring?
Well, we call it the old Pine Box Trail. I'm giving Lane a call if I'm Auburn. I gotta tell you,
it makes so much sense. I guess it depends who you want to be, though, right? It's like, do you want your program builder to like make you a Bama? Yeah, maybe. I don't know if Lane's quite that, but if you want to be Auburn, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like if you want to be Auburn and just like, I don't know, this kind of fluctuating punching team that can like take Bama down, and every like 2 or 3 years you like weirdly are hot enough to be in the playoff conversation. Like, get Lane, man, and that's just so good for the sport too.
Listen, the last coach to leave Ole Miss and go to Auburn is now a U.S. senator. So
Yeah.
I look forward to Lane Kiffin in Congress. Just get it done.
That's a great point.
Speaking of powerful people, Texas A&M's $75 million man down in oil country. Brody, I don't know that we were necessarily writing the Jimbo obituary. I don't think anybody was quite there. Maybe for the season. I think our colleague Andy Staples may have written the obituary with saying they could go 1-5, which was definitely possible. Yeah. They did not. Now, certainly Miami offered a lot of reason to question A&M's win on the weekend when they lost to Middle Tennessee State quite convincingly at home in Coral Gables. But Arkansas is a good team. We've seen Arkansas. They already have wins over Cincinnati and South Carolina. They've looked really good. They were in the top 10. And A&M wins that game. Obviously, dramatic fashion. They need the crazy fumble return to flip the game when they said they were probably going into the half down 21-7.
Yes,
with very little momentum. Then all of a sudden, they missed the extra point, but still, you're basically tied at that point. And then the kick from Cam Little off the top of the uprights, absolutely crazy. But they win the game, and you're sitting there if you are Texas A&M, and you're still 3-1. And you've got Mississippi State this weekend. That's a tough trip. Obviously, to Alabama, the game that has lost a little bit of juice, maybe, but still good. And then your schedule lightens up later in the season. The A&M playoff stuff was probably always a pipe dream of sorts.
Yeah, it was at least a year too soon. Yeah.
But here's my hot Jimbo take for you. Okay,
let's go.
It's fun. It's fun to dunk on the $75 million coach, and it's going to cost them, at this point with the extension and the raise, his buyout is north of $90 million and he can leave for $0. All these things are both insane and funny, but Jimbo's still a pretty good coach. And I think games like Saturday and situations like that team was in after the App State game are why you hire Jimbo Fisher and why you pay a coach $7 million, because he got the team off the mat. They have 2 really good wins. And I'm not sure there's a ton of coaches, one, who could do that, and 2, for all the underwhelmingness of A&M having more talent than their on-field product suggests, they still have a lot of talent. They have more talent than Arkansas, and they won that game. They were better than Arkansas on that day, and they won a game in which they were probably if you play out that game again, okay, if you sit there and you say, okay, Arkansas's got the ball again at the 3, down 14 or up 14-7, A&M loses that game probably 90% of the time, 75% of the time.
And we can even use our good friend Bill Connolly at ESPN's, post-game win expectancy 67% of the time. And that's not like the BS graph that we see of like 98% chance to win. No, it's like
that math is fake.
We don't know that. But
yes. Go ahead.
For those who don't know, like it's just an actually comprehensive look at everything, play by play, success rate, everything of like who actually played better. 67% of the time, Arkansas wins that game. So it's like you're right. They deserve credit for that, and it's like to some element the most boring take, but the real one is like, this team was always probably a year away from like there was a little bit of like, we know their talent and they have the number 1 class. They're a top 10 team. And we just didn't know who the good teams were this year. There's a little bit of that, I think.
Ultimately, you need a quarterback. Jimbo won his national title with Jameis. Like, we can joke about Jameis now, but he's a really good college quarterback. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, he was a really good player. And they don't have that. Haynes King is not that guy. Yeah. Max Johnson,
he added something they didn't have. Yeah, like he looked better.
Like he played well, but like he's not going to win you, 11 games on his back. Is Connor Wegman that guy?
Maybe down the road.
He's really young. Maybe eventually. On the flip side, Arkansas's got to be careful. I'm glad we were here. I sold my Arkansas stock, so I didn't take a loss on Saturday. But man, they got to be careful. I didn't think Arkansas at any point was one of the 10 best teams in the country.
No,
I thought they were borderline 15-20. Somewhere in there. And I think we saw it, but you got to be careful if you're Arkansas at this point, because you have that loss to A&M that you probably should have had, and this schedule is just so difficult. Now, of course, you have Bama coming to town, who I'm not sure Arkansas matches up well with them at all. Nope. Arkansas does match up really well with A&M. I thought they'd win that game. They did not. And then you go to Mississippi State, which again, corners issues. I think Arkansas, their scheme matches up pretty well because they like to drop that 7 or 8, and I think you can keep everything in front of you. They're not going to get, they don't have to do things that they don't used to doing. They don't play a ton of like press man on you. If you're used to doing that, and then you play Mississippi State and you have to do something else or die, I guess if you try to do that, teams can really get out of their sorts. But I think they match up pretty well. But still, Mississippi State's a good team, and then you go to BYU. You're still on the road at Auburn. We'll see what Auburn is at that point. If you're not careful, you're sitting there looking at 3-3, 3-4, 4-3. There's a lot of losable games up there. Arkansas, you got to bring it. And I think ultimately, whatever happens with Bama this week, I think Arkansas can maybe put a scare into them if their offense doesn't play well. But you can't come out of that game not healthy, which Arkansas has already had an issue with. They lost Jalen Catalon for the year already. That's a huge loss for them. And they've been a little banged up. But, man, Arkansas's got to be careful because your promise of the early start here, you're in a real – this is where you decide what the season becomes. Are you a 9-win team or are you a 6-win team? You kind of find out in the next 3 weeks.
And I think I'm coming out of this game, though, as much as like the stock goes down because they lost. I think I come out of that game more impressed with Arkansas, like more sure of kind of who they are. And I think they are what they are, right? Like they're one of the few. We keep the theme of the show is like we can't figure out who's good. They're one of the few where I think we have enough data points because of the schedule that like we know who they are. They have a really good offense. Like that isn't objectively like 16th in SP plus. And I was more impressed with them than anything in that game because everything kept going wrong outside of them. And every drive they moved within the 30. They drove consistently against a really, really good A&M defense. The ability to get guys in space was fantastic. Kendall Briles is just a really good OC, and KJ Jefferson, again, not putting him in the Hendon Hooker class, but he's just a very good SEC quarterback. He is. And at the end of the day, this just isn't a good defense. And it's probably a bit of a transition year. Catalon's out. Like it just is what it is. On the back end, Max Johnson was finding guys really open. That's not a great sign, but they are what they are. And I come out of that game pretty impressed because, again, I get so obnoxious talking about like sustainability and like predictive stuff, but it's just like, yeah, in every single one of those metrics, they were the team that was more productive than A&M. And yeah, A&M was the team that gets credit for the win, and they deserve it, to your point. Like Jimbo earned that. They just kind of find ways to win these games, and that's what football is, as much as we love talking about all this other stuff. But I do look at this team to think they can compete. Yeah, I don't think they beat Bama, but if I'm handicapping it right now, they're probably better than Mississippi State. I think they are better than BYU. And even though I love this BYU team and they're fun, I really like them, I think Arkansas wins that. So you're right. They have to be careful. There's a lot of ways this can go really, really bad. But at the same time, I still really like them. And it's probably going to feel like by the end of the year, it's like 2019 Auburn is my best example of this, of like a team, the schedule is just not going to tell us the truth. Arkansas is probably going to be 8-4, and it's not going to feel accurate where like Auburn's, every team that played Auburn in 2019 said they were the best non-LSU team they played, but they kept losing. I have a feeling it's going to be kind of like that.
I would like to see Arkansas compete in the Big Ten West for a year, I think is my take overall.
I want that so bad.
Like that's a 10 or 11 win team like that.
They win this year. I mean,
yes.
Like, I guess I don't know what to make of Minnesota or whatever, but yeah, like they would win this year. Oh, that would be so good. And they are a Big Ten West team in every like identifiable way, but they'd make it more fun. Oh God, we need that.
A couple breaking news items we will see when Jimbo talks later today. It sounds like Anais Smith out.
That's a huge bummer.
That's not a huge loss for them. Him and Devin A-Chain are really incredible. Or
A-Chain's been so good.
As Dan Mullen would say on ESPN's broadcast, Devin A-Chain, which
Connie, I believe it was.
There were some books there, and then Jeff Collins fired at Georgia Tech.
Yes.
This is an SEC show. Georgia Tech's an interesting job in general. I don't think
you were in the SEC at one point, right?
Yeah, I think so. Georgia Dion does not make any sense for the Georgia Tech job. That doesn't need to happen.
I love the idea of him in Atlanta and like recruiting to Georgia Tech, but
Georgia Tech's not it.
Just in a realistic way. Like Andy's pointed this out really well before, but like the academic stuff at Georgia Tech is so much harder than a lot of other schools that have reputations for being like hard to get into. Like Georgia Tech's just tough to stay with. So yeah, I think that's not the best.
We got to talk about this week's games.
Fine.
Let's start with Ole Miss. We have no idea what Ole Miss is. Ole Miss is kind of a Rorschach test at this point. They helped get Jeff Collins fired. They have also looked real shaky. We still don't know what their quarterback situation is. Like Altmaier is clearly the backup, but also like Lane's had kind of a quick trigger where he's gotten in a couple times.
Yep.
Zach Evans is a stud. They've kept him rolling. We'll see what Ole Miss is. Kentucky, great test for them. You're high on Kentucky. I want to be with you on Kentucky. I think Kentucky can win this game. I just don't know we don't know what Ole Miss is at this point, and this is a game that will show us because I kind of am with you on a lot of the Ole Miss skepticism.
Yeah.
That all these parts together, it's asking a lot. But man, when they look good, they look really good, and I don't know what they have to offer, or what they're going to look like this week. But this is going to be a massive game that's going to tell us a lot more about Ole Miss than Kentucky. I think we kind of know who Kentucky is.
Yeah, I mean, but I think the thing that I keep repeating is like, and I know you don't disagree, but it's just like they're a team that the entire thing was they were built to take care of business against worse teams because they can run the ball so well and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first week they played, I think, like just a tough, kind of challenging opponent in Tulsa. And they only won by 8 and almost allowed a miraculous late Tulsa comeback. They were down 14-7 early too. So like early in the game and late in the game, Tulsa kind of outplayed them. They couldn't bring down escaping every sack. And we are now 4 games in. And this passing game, Jackson Dart was 13 of 24 for 150 yards against Tulsa. They weren't able to – the run game's still great. That's going to be great. But I love Kentucky at stopping that. It's the one thing I trust Kentucky to contain. I trust Kentucky to make life just hard for Jackson Dart. And I just don't – but still, like at the end of the day, they don't have the offense to really challenge. They don't have the passing attack to challenge if this game gets high scoring. And I don't know if Ole Miss's defense can really contain Will Levis the way I saw Tulsa break out of these plays or ran for 6 yards a carry on them. That's the first decent test. So I just don't love this Ole Miss team. We're going to get to picks later. I think we know what mine's going to be. Like, I like Kentucky a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I just think that there's so much talent on this Ole Miss team that there's an opportunity here where Ole Miss wins this game by double digits, and you say, "Oh, okay,
I like that. That's fair."
Ole Miss has maybe changed my mind. We'll find out. This is why they play the games, Brody. I'm very excited to see this Ole Miss team, and
this is the most fun game I feel like in a few weeks.
I think I'm with you.
Or maybe just for nerds like us. I don't know, but
perhaps. Speaking of Mississippi State, they let us down, Brody. We were on the Mississippi State train.
I'm buying.
I held my stock. We're back.
Yeah.
Now they get the Aggies, who are hot right now.
Yeah, what's your take on this one?
I like Mississippi State again, man. I'm on them. Again, if you have a competent offense, you are going to give A&M problems. Yep. A&M cannot score right now. They cannot score, even with Max Johnson, especially now. Noah Nias Smith, that's a huge loss. They love to throw it to those backs. Evan Stewart, I think, is going to be a great player. But they just don't have the receivers to really, even do a ton.
They can make really a special play, but they can't really.
Yeah, you're not shaking your boots for 60 minutes a game. You look at if you're a defensive coordinator, and you're trying to scheme up this offense. There's not a lot that's keeping you awake at night. There's just not. They don't do anything spectacularly well. The offensive line is not as good as they needed, as they have been at times, especially when you look at that 2020 offensive line. The term maroon goons is currently sitting in a closet somewhere in the Kyle Field, or is it the Bright Complex down there, collecting dust. It's a bit like the Nebraska black shirts. It hadn't come out in a while. No. Now we'll see. They have maybe earned what happened to the A&M wrecking crew? Nobody uses that anymore. What happened? This is a team that's certainly is one that could come close to earning that moniker. We'll see. But they have their own hand signal. It's one of these. Let me get this. Wait, it's the
I want to make sure. Yeah.
It's the wrecking crew. I think it's
nice.
Backwards. So when they were I remember peak. I think it started in the 80s or 90s, but they brought it back whenever Von Miller was there. And every time Von Miller would make a sack, he'd come up and he would flash the WC. Anyway,
I'm gonna start doing that.
They got to break that back out. I haven't seen much of it. Maybe I just haven't been paying attention. But the wrecking crew, this is a good A&M defense. So they can maybe slow down Mississippi State. We'll see if they can completely eliminate Mississippi State's running game. But I like the Bulldogs in this one.
I think I do too, man. I just look at it as this is a really good Mississippi State defense. Like they are.
Mm-hmm.
I know like the LSU game, the second half like was kind of misleading, I think, in some extent, but they are the number 21 defense in SP Plus. They're really good at containing things in turn. Like when they're really good at containing in that 3-3-5. And I feel like when that's your scheme, that's not conducive to Max Johnson. Like I feel like when you're like putting him in a box and making him like kind of play this short game and hitting tight windows, I think that's when Max Johnson kind of maybe makes some reckless choices that we saw at LSU. Yeah, I just like Mississippi State here for a lot of reasons. But the question that will decide it, I don't know the answer to this, is I came away from that LSU game really concerned about State's offense. Like they couldn't get going against LSU, and LSU might have a really great defense. We'll see. But the offensive line was supposed to be pretty experienced and good for State. They had a really tough time with LSU. A&M will be able to create some similar havoc. So I'm interested to see that. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I like Mississippi State here.
Yeah. Brody, are we concerned about Georgia?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Like, how many times do we have to yell? I know. You like, how many times do we have to yell? Judge teams by who they are when they're on. Don't judge them by who they are against Kent State.
That's what the playoff committee does. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And like, by the way, Sean Lewis, Kent State's a great coach. Kent State is not a program that like we should just yada yada. But still, like that doesn't mean anything. Like, no, I'm not worried. What about you?
Here's my concern. They looked pretty bored. I think they got up early, and I really thought this is a defense that could lock down on Kent State. We did not really see that, obviously. No. They were never really in the game, as one would say. But this is still a Kent State team that scored 3 points against Oklahoma. So to put up 22 against Georgia is pretty impressive. Here's my concern is that Georgia's so much better than so many teams. Okay, you get a little bored against Kent State.
Yeah.
Okay, Kent State's in their best day is probably not going to beat Georgia, and they already played them. But like, you get bored against a South Carolina, you get bored against a Mississippi State type of caliber team. You get bored against. Certainly, they wouldn't get bored against Tennessee, them, but you have Florida. That type of team where you just don't have it that day. This is what I wrote about this today a little bit. Is that the thing about Alabama is that they were great every time they came out. The number of times under Nick Saban that Alabama has played flat or just not their usual self. I mean, you could probably count it on one hand over 10, 15 years. It's crazy. And that, I think, is where Georgia has to prove themselves and not have the weird loss. And in some ways, they're so talented that it's hard for teams to even sniff them. So I'm not worried, but that was not an invested Georgia team, and you have to limit those games. There haven't been a lot of times where Alabama, who is obviously the team that Georgia compares themselves to, plays a game like that and just looks ugh.
I don't know. Like, I'm just kind of like, I hate this is terrible podcasting, but it's just like I don't think it meant anything. Like even Bennett throwing like that terrible INT and making some mistakes, you're still 27 of 36 for 272 yards. Or like the run game still ran for 5 or 6 yards a carry. Like I don't think Kent State really gained a lot. There was just some weird plays. Like I don't think I'm worried. That's all I'll really say. Yeah.
Brock Bowers is a freak. I'll give him a shot.
By the way, am I crazy? I put him on my Heisman, our straw poll this week. Am I stupid for that?
No, I drafted him in our Heisman poll. There's about 10 or 15 guys you could reasonably vote for. He was not on my ballot. I did consider him.
I had Hooker one, by the way.
Nice, interesting.
I
still had Stroud one. I think I had Hooker 2, and I
have thoughts on Stroud, but I'm not a Big Ten
pod. Bama, Arkansas, real quickly. What's your feel for that, Brody? I don't know that Arkansas matches up well with them. What's your feel for?
Yeah, I think, and we obviously discussed it before. But I think it's like I still love this Arkansas team, but yeah, I just think this matches up well for Bryce Young picking apart that secondary. And
I think this is gonna be a quiet game for Jahmyr Gibbs, but a big game for these receivers. Arkansas's corners. That's how you get blown out against Bama.
Exactly. Plays. Arkansas might not look like a worse team to me after this game, but they might lose by 28 just because that one thing. Sometimes it's not like So I think Alabama wins this one convincingly, but I still like Arkansas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brody, I got to tell you, I didn't go back and listen to whether or not you took the A&M
We had a
money
text
lineup.
debate over this for our listeners.
But either way, either you won it or it pushed last week.
I didn't lose. Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners will correct us. But our pick of the week this week, mine cashed semi-easily. I took the Arkansas A&M under 48. Looking a little shaky there.
Kind of fraudulently, actually, now I think about it.
Somewhat,
a touchdown at the goal line. No, that's still points. I take that back. Even though the Arkansas should have scored, A&M did score. So never mind. You're good.
But at the end of the day, you had a decisive kick where you couldn't go into overtime, so I'll take it.
You earned it. Yeah.
Brody, walk us through your pick for this week.
I've walked it through already, right? Yeah, I love Kentucky +6. I think I've seen 6.5 too. I guess that means you might be able to get a 7, but we'll say 6 just to be comfortable. I love Kentucky 6 for all the reasons I mentioned before. I love that pick.
I am going to continue living in A&M Underland.
This time I'm with you. I actually kind of wondered if you were wrong last time. This time I'm really with you. Continue.
A&M Mississippi State under 46. Listen, that game might not get to 40. I think A&M is going to be able to absolutely lock down Mississippi State.
Yep.
And I just think A&M is not going to be able to move the ball well against Mississippi State's front. Yep. And they're good enough to not let anything go over the top.
Yep.
Call my shot here. Look out for Mississippi State defensive touchdown in this ball game. The 3-3-5, Max Johnson. Boy, that 3-3-5 makes your eyes lie to you a lot.
So what's the number you got it at?
46.
46. Okay, yeah, I like that.
I'm taking the under on that. It's just going to be a tough sledding type of ball game. A&M knows what they're doing. Mississippi State obviously won that game last year. Was that the first? I believe that was the first loss for A&M. Was it not?
Pretty sure.
I'm gonna
fact check it as we speak, but I'm pretty sure
it was. That was the one where you kind of, because I wasn't really into Mississippi State last year, but
26-22. Yep. No, that was the second loss.
Second loss. Okay. Oh, it was Arkansas the first loss.
Correct.
The 20. Okay. Well, either way, I'm taking it. Two good defenses. A&M offense gives you not a ton, and I think their defense can slow down Mississippi State, similar to the way that LSU slowed them down. Don't play press man. That's all. Just don't play press man. Anyway,
good strategy.
Thank you guys for listening. This has been Football and Grits. Not a lot of grits discussion on this show, but a lot of football discussion.
We say this at the end of every show. You'd think like next week we'll prepare on grit talk. I don't know. Perhaps.
But
I'm making grits this week. I'm saying it right now. I'm making grits this week.
All right, there you go. That's a promise from Brody. Maybe you can live on the show next week, make some grits, and we can truly have a Football and Grits show.
My girlfriend makes great grits and griots if you want to go full Louisiana, but I don't know if I have that much time on my hands.
I've only made grits like twice, but I do enjoy them. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stirring. It's a lot of.
I was gonna scold you, and then I'm like, wait, I'm from Jersey. Like, who am I to be like, you fake Southerner? Like, no, what am I doing here?
Yes, but it's whatever. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Again, subscribe, leave a comment, review, all that stuff. Thank you guys for joining us. Those of you who are joining us live, those of you who are listening to us on whatever podcast purveyor you choose, subscribe to the Andy Staples Show feed. Andy and Ari, of course, doing their thing, eating weird things from week to week. Power Hour, Max Olson and Sam Kahn, and of course, Football and Grits. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back again next week talking about why Mississippi State has probably let us down yet again, and the latest chapter in the Anthony Richardson saga, I'm sure. So
let's just bookmark it into next week's rundown now, 20-minute mark. Anthony Richardson.
We might have to have a Will Levis meeting this time next week. We'll see.
I like it.
We'll see. Well, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you again next week.